And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Top Dog Talk podcast. I'm your host, Harrison Reno, alongside me, co-host Dan Kylie. I think we're going to go backwards hat boys today, get some backwards hat action today here on the Top Dog Talk podcast. Anyways, guys, it's a great Tuesday. Another great weekend of college football done and dusted. Time to move on to week 4. Is this 4, Dan? I can't rock the backwards hat. I'm not as cool as Dan is. But I think this is week 4 of college football. Man, season's already blowing by because we're already, I think we're a third of the way through. Quarter of the way through the season. And, I mean, nothing but good weekends of football. Every time somebody says the slate doesn't look good, does a game just pop up on you? As Dan's trying to go.
I can't do it, Robert.
So, yeah, we had another great slate of football games this weekend. A little bit of a rivalry week, if you will, this weekend. Got just great slate all around. Looking forward to Colorado USC. We'll get to Colorado here in a little bit. Dan, how you doing this Tuesday?
Man, it has been a busy week. It is only Tuesday, but you know what? When the national safety director flies in for a major safety audit at your workplace, it's a big deal. But I am ready to talk sports. You miss out on so much great content because Harrison and I, we talk so much on the phone about different things, and half of it doesn't even make it there. Hell, half the time when our show is over, I was like, oh, man, I wanted to say this, that, and the other, and I always forget. So let's have a great show today.
Absolutely. Let's get right into it, Dan. As my hat looks sideways, I'm going to try and fix that off camera. Dan, what coach will you never give the benefit of the doubt to? This is college coaches, NFL coaches, just any one coach that has burned you or, let's say, let you down.
Well, and this is such a perfect hot topic right now because of the whole Mike Bobo thing, right? There is a section of this Georgia fan base that will not ever give him the benefit of the doubt. Was he perfect? No, he wasn't perfect. But, the hatred towards Mike Bobo. So that's what got me thinking about this one. Mine is pretty self-explanatory. I hate Jimbo Fisher. However, it's not him. It's Bobby Petrino. I will never, ever trust that snake around one of my football teams ever. I don't have a whole lot to add because I don't have a whole lot of nice things to say about Bobby Petrino. And my mom always said, if you ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all. But just his former players, the way they talk about him, the people in the building, we went from Dan Reeves to that dude. No, I'm out. I'm out on Bobby Petrino. Harrison, who's your guy?
Sorry, was putting out the podcast or the YouTube notification that we're live. My guy, Dan, no surprise. Also, former pro coach. Now is on TV. I know Bobby Petrino's coaching these days. I believe he's at A&M, offensive coordinator, if I remember correctly. Dan, is Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett burned me third degree. Third-degree burns do I have from Jason Garrett. And, hey, it was the most – Cowboys would win 10 games, maybe 12, next year, 8-8. You can count on it. They would win 10 games, 10-plus, go 8-8 the next year. You can just book it. They're going to miss the playoffs. It was the most roller coaster ride that I've ever experienced as a sports fan. Like, just every other year. Okay, make the playoffs. Holy crap. This could be the year you actually make it out of the divisional round. Nope. Aaron Rodgers says, nah, bruh. And then 8-8 the next year. I'm just never going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think they picked the wrong guy, the wrong coach, the wrong coordinator, promote from within. You should have picked Sean Payton, who, by the way, God bless you, Sean Payton. You got 70 dropped on you this weekend. Not a good look, buddy. Not a good look when you've been talking that talk all off season long. But Dan, definitely for me, Jason Garrett, I don't think there's much explaining to do there. I think I've kind of made my point clear. You go from 8-8 every other year to now Mike McCarthy's winning 12 games 3 years in a row. That's elite stuff over there from Mike McCarthy. Dan, I see you're dealing with technical difficulties. Are you still with us?
I think I'm here. Am I here?
I hear you. Your camera's are pixelated, but you're here. I can hear you.
All right. Well, I'm here. So let's move on to the next one. And Harrison, if you want to introduce this one, and I don't know if you can hear, like you're making faces. So
You're good. You're good. You're good. You're good. Which team So I believe we're gonna go with. Do you want to go college football specific with this one, or do you want to go pros in college? Because I know you got your pro answer. But let's have some fun here. Let's make it college first, and if you have an NFL team, go ahead and put them in there. Which team has burned you the most, college or pros? Let's open with college first.
I would say most recently, and they have not necessarily burned me yet this year, but it's always been for me USC because I saw what USC could be with the right leadership and the talent and the money that they have. And when they had Pete Carroll running that program, that was as powerful as I've ever seen a college football program. And you can say Alabama, 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 Alabama. Cool. I got you. What USC did, and granted, it was not a long period of time, but when USC had it humming out on the West Coast, I have never seen something that powerful before, and it felt like it was never going to end, and it felt like nobody else had a chance to even be successful. So I will say that USC gets me time and time again because I just, in the back of my mind, I remember that, and I always think that they're going to be able to return to that, and then they'll have so much hype leading up to the season that they make you believe that. And for me, over and over again, it's always USC. I always think they're going to be back, and then they end up never being back. Harry Dog.
My bad. I'm doing 1,000 things at one time, guys. I got to focus in. Good. USC is a great answer, Ian. But I'm gonna one up you here.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Tennessee. That's been it lately. Tennessee. We both had them 10 wins last year. And they did. They won 10 games last year. I'll give them credit. They did a great job. Probably outperformed where I think they should have been in year 2 under Josh Heupel. But you come into this year, they lost to Florida, a team that most people had winning 5 games, lost to Florida. Like, we're talking about a team that had, by all means, their best year since Peyton Manning. Dan, I don't know what's going on with our technical difficulties today. I'm going to switch my mic, come unplugged somehow. Okay. Sorry, guys. That technical difficulty.
Yeah, so I don't know where he left off, but yeah, so I will go back. Mine was USC, his was Tennessee, and he had a lot of good things to say because he told me a little bit about him before the show. But I do have an NFL team, and it's not a team that I'm necessarily a fan of or anything like that. It's just for whatever reason, I keep believing that the Detroit Lions are going to be good. And I don't know why I believe that. It's over and over and over again, time and time again. I hear all these things, and I think the Detroit Lions are going to be good, and they never are. And so that is my team. Robert had a really good one is the Miami Hurricanes. And Robert, I've been there with you on the Miami Hurricanes time and time again. But for me, USC is just bigger for me because I'm just always expecting them to pop back, but Miami's another really, really good one. And like I said, for me on the NFL level, I don't know why I'm not a fan of the team. It's just always been the Detroit Lions. I don't know why. They just get me every time. Every time there's a little bit of buzz, Dan bites it hook, line, and sinker, and I end up looking stupid.
The Jets are also a good one. I mean, recently, like, what have you done for me lately? Mm-hmm. Aaron Rodgers goes down. They had a lot of hype back when Brett Favre came over there, 2 former Packers, and he goes down with injury. Yeah, rough going for the Jets. We're talking about a franchise like the Lions, the Jets, probably 2 of the most cursed franchise in the NFL, at least today. I know the Browns have something to say about being a cursed franchise. Yeah. Dan, for me, it's been the Cowboys. I mean, legit, they just dropped a game. You just laid an egg to the Arizona Cardinals, which has become a thing recently. Like, they dropped one last year, the Washington Commanders' final game of the year. Year before that, they lost to the Denver Broncos. Just lay an egg here and there when everyone expects them to be good. So you went from being the most talked about best team in the NFL to being, what the heck are you doing? So always interesting there. Dan, National Obsession of the Week. Speaking of people who have burned you,
right?
Deion Sanders in Colorado got their butt whooped, which to the non-mainstream media folk who tried to build this narrative that because Colorado started undefeated for the first time in who knows how long, that they were going to be a contender for the Pac-12, just poof, gone, just like that. And now, Dan, just when you thought the Colorado hype was going to cease to exist, they have a new villain, Dan. Dan Lanning's the villain. Dan Lanning's the villain because he went out there and tried to win a football game. And now we're back on this whole Dion comes out after the game, and I respect it. Dion comes out after the game, says, I got my ass whooped. That's what happened. But you better get me now because this is the worst we're going to get. I respect it, Dion. But you know what I don't respect, Dan? How the mainstream media is going to turn this, going to use that pregame speech as, oh, man, Dan Lanning's jealous of Dion. Dan Lanning's scared of Dion. I'm like, no. Dan Lanning went out there and won a football game. Dan Lanning showed you that he can coach at the highest of high levels. What was your takeaway, Dan? I know you work on Saturdays, but I believe this is one of the games you got to watch. So what were your takeaways, not only from the game, but the aftermath?
I get very frustrated with this whole narrative. I think, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, and I think I know where you stand, but for me, I've been excited about the Colorado stuff. I said they were going to be my guilty pleasure. I had no illusions that they were going to beat Oregon. I am on the record. I did not think that was going to happen. So I don't time me into that boat. But here's my problem is, and it's like with everything else in this country, and don't get yourself butthurt. Just listen to what I'm saying. Everything's turning into a black or white issue right now. And that's going to be my point on this. And this is why I got very angry about this weekend, because what Dion does, he gets praised for. What another coach does, he gets yelled at for, right? So Dan Lanning was doing what every coach should do, is get his team fired up to play and win. He was not hating on Dion. He has said time and time again that Dion is good for the sport because he's drawing attention to the sport. He even said in his post-game press conference, he understood that the reason that 20 million fans or whatever it was watched the game, he said probably 80% of them were there because of Deion Sanders. He gives him a lot of credit. He says this guy is doing a great job. He's doing a lot of things for these kids. He's like, but it's my job to get my team motivated to play. And then they said, well, you were scoring, you're like a vindictive play calling. And he's, I don't even know what that is. And he's like, did I go for it on fourth down? Absolutely I did. And I have in every game so far this season. Did I go for two? Absolutely I did. I've gone for 3 out of the 4 games we played this season. And I will again. And he's like, did I continue to score? Yes, I did continue to score because they have a high-powered offense, and I'm not going to put myself in a position to get caught sleeping. And that goes back to our conversation a couple of weeks ago, Harrison, where it's running up the score. That is not running up the score. What they did was not running up the score. That was within the context of the game. They did not run. And I don't give a shit if they did run up the score, because that is another quality opponent and an opponent that was bringing a lot of juice. So you put it on them if you can. And Dion's right. Catch me if you can. And I don't think there's a beef between Dan Lanning and Deion Sanders. I do believe there's a beef between the media and clicks. And the media is doing whatever they can to get clicks. And what they're going to do is they are going to do what the media always does. And this is why I said, don't get butthurt and please listen to what I'm saying. The media always inserts the race card because it generates the most attention. Okay. And that's my biggest thing with this right here. Deion's not a racist guy. Dan Lanning is not a racist guy. The people who say that Deion's getting too much attention for stuff, they're not racist people. They're just telling you the truth. But they're going to insert that card because that's what it benefits and gets them the most ratings possible. And that's what the media does. And that's what the media has become. It's become very, very sad, because if you strip all that away, you have a really damn good story to tell. They just don't want to tell that story. So that's my take on it. At the end of the day, Dan Lanning was coaching his football team. Deion was coaching his football team. They don't have a problem with each other. So I don't know why we have to create an artificial hatred for one another. It doesn't exist. That's my take.
They're fighting for clits. We're fighting for wins.
But you know what?
Did that speech have me gassed up when that came out, Dan? Like, talking about that pregame speech before the, or quote, pregame speech before the national championship that everybody leaked out. Like, Dan Lanning knows how to motivate his team. No, we did not talk about wearing hats before. Well, we brought it up. My hair was not looking great, so I said I'm throwing on a hat. Dan gets in here and says right before we go live, "Give me a second, I gotta go get a hat." I'm like, "We're rocking it. We're rocking it." Sider, not everybody has beautiful, luscious hair on their chin and on their
Yeah,
head like you.
we can't look beautiful like you, Mr. Stoddard.
Yeah,
I mean, look at
100% of
the
day.
picture. Just look at the picture. Look how beautiful that man is. I mean, I'm not that beautiful.
Hey, we're made for radio, Sider. We're not built for TV like you, buddy. Dan, I think you hit the nail on the head here. But let's get to the second thing. There's two. Hey, guys, we have a
Yes.
two-parter national obsession, and I don't know if we got any Swifties in here, but we're talking about Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift. Dan, it has been the craziest thing. I thought for sure that what would be dominating the discussion Sunday was going to be the Dolphins beating the crap out of the Broncos or the Cowboys losing to the Cardinals. But no, it was Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Something that has been simmering, a story that has been simmering, a rumor, which now turns out to be true. It's blown up. It's everywhere. I'm still seeing stuff, and we're T-minus 2 days after. It is crazy, Dan. Absolutely crazy that a football-related romance story is the number one thing people want to talk about on social media. And heck, it has blown up so big that Dan and I are talking about it on here. Like, we're not, when you go to Walmart and you go to checkout, at least in my hometown, there's those magazines up front, Dan, right by the checkout, has all like the drama-related magazines, like what's going on between the marriage of the English prince and princess, stuff like that. Like, this is the type of stuff you see in those. But no, we're getting this Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift on ESPN, on Sports Center.
So, like, I don't have all the stats, but I'm going to give you a couple. Travis Kelce now has the number 3 selling jersey in the NFL. He was up from, I think it was like 14 or 15. He's up to number 3. The Chiefs merchandise has gone up 400% in 2 days because of Taylor Swift. The jacket that she wore to the game has not been released to the media yet, and everybody is trying to find it. And it's going to be on Fanatics whenever it does come out, and they said that they will be sold out on day one. Travis Kelce has 325,000 new Instagram followers since Sunday. Obviously, Taylor Swift's mega tour across the world is completely sold out. Travis Kelce's other merchandise is up 400%. Fanatic fans, their stuff is up 400%. All Chiefs games are sold out for the rest of the season, and their secondary market pricing has gone up 718%. So all the people who are saying this is a stunt, might be onto something. Did you see Ella Dorsey, who is a weather person around here who we all love? She's absolutely a gorgeous person. She says, this is completely a stunt. That man ain't never touched that woman.
So, this is gonna be something to watch. How many views the new Kelce documentary will get?
The Kelce podcast is now the number 1 most downloaded podcast in America. It was not even in the top 10.
And hey, I mean, I'm one of those new viewers, not because of the Taylor Swift stuff. I started listening to it a few weeks ago. Just absolute great stuff. Like, they've had some great interviews. Julian Edelman was on there a few times. Just some great content there. Any player-led content's always, at least from what I found, is great. But yeah, Dan, it's absolutely insane. Bill Belichick said this is the greatest catch of Travis Kelce's career, and that's saying something. When Bill Belichick comes out here, who is a Swiftie, from what I've learned, Bill Belichick's a big Taylor Swift fan.
Did you hear the interview where he answered all the questions in her song titles?
No.
Oh, it was like a couple weeks ago. Like, so people were asking him questions, and he's like, "I knew you were gonna be trouble when you walked in," and then he's like, it was just like every single answer was just like, I'm like, he would have never done that when he had Tom Brady.
This is a guy. We're talking about a guy who, like, is 100%, like, his football brain never turns off. Like, right. Nick Saban, Kirby Smart levels, just constantly going. I mean, we even have people in the Georgia media space asking Brock Bowers what his thoughts were, and he says it's a win for the tight ends.
You know, the funny thing to me is that if you look at people who are you think you have an idea about somebody, right? But there's always something about that somebody that surprises you. Like the one for me, and I think you know this, and I think the boys know this too, but I'm a massive Elton John fan. And like
I did not know that.
most people like I'm a big sports guy, whatever like that. And they're like, how are you an Elton John fan? Well, because I was named after the song Daniel. And my mom was a huge Elton John fan growing up. And every song, everything that she ever played in her house was Elton John all the time. So I'm a huge Elton John fan. So like to say that Bill Belichick is a Swiftie, yeah, that's shocking, but that's one of those like cool things about humanity in general is if you really take the time to get to know people, there's always going to be something that surprises you. Yeah, well, whatever. I'm old. I don't care. I like, I like the Beatles too, and I wasn't even alive when they were making music, so I don't
He's
know
not
how
even
that's
British
relevant.
either.
Yeah, not even British, mate.
Yeah, it is funny how football has a way of bringing people you think would never be able to sit in a room together actually together. Like Bill Belichick and a bunch of Swifties.
Yeah, right.
Never seen it. Like never would have thought it. So at least it's nice to know that Bill Belichick has as much in common as my little sisters do. So hey, that it is what it is, Dan. Dan, let's talk your rant of the week. It is a Georgia related topic, something that we were talking about for hot topics, but I think you really hit the nail on the head with this one. So Dan, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Yeah, so this is my rant of the week, and I hope you guys are all here dialed in and ready to go because I'm going to be fired up a little bit about this one. So, the false narratives, okay? So, at the beginning of the season, there was the narrative that started to come out. And listen, in the beginning, there were a lot of Georgia fans that were complaining about Mike Bobo, this team, this offense, okay? And a lot of the media or the fan sites and stuff like that, they came out and started giving us, and our very own Jonathan Williams was giving us stats on, comparing last year's team to this year's team, what, Monken did versus what Bobo did. Okay. So now, this narrative is growing is that the entire Georgia fan base absolutely hates this Georgia football team. They're not happy. They're this, they're that. They hate Mike Bobo. It's this, that, the other. And here's what I'm here to tell you is, in the last week and a half, I have seen more people bitching about the Georgia fan base, bitching about Mike Bobo, than I've actually seen people bitching about Mike Bobo. It's like everybody has grabbed onto that and they're running with it. But like I'm going through my timeline and I'm searching for these people that are bitching about Mike Bobo. And yes, they were there week 1 and in week 2. They're not there right now. And maybe they're just exhausted. Maybe they're just tired. And at the end of the day, even if they are bitching, it's the vocal minority. It's the 2-3% of a fan base that gets on to social media and wants to run their mouth. It's not the majority of the fan base. I think it's okay to say that you were a little bit frustrated that Georgia started out slow, but that doesn't mean that you hate everything that they're doing, that you hate the team, that you hate Mike Bobo. And I, even to expand on that further, I've already told you there is a certain segment of this fan base that is never, ever going to support Mike Bobo. That's why we did the hot topic, the coach that you won't give the benefit of the doubt to, because there are a segment of this group that hates freaking Mike Bobo. It's never going to change. The guy could score 79 points a game. It doesn't matter. They're going to hate him. Third and Bobo. Here we go. Run, run, punt. Run, run, punt. I mean, hell, we're punting on third down now. I don't know. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. Yes, Jeremiah, there are people who are bitching, but my timeline is filled more with people bitching at those people than actually people bitching. And that's the whole point of this rant. It's like, just let it go. Shut up about it. Because if you stop talking about it, what do these people want? They want attention. You're giving them attention. Just shut up about it. It's really not that bad anymore. Like I said, that vocal minority is making themselves look even stupider every single time that they open up their mouth, because Georgia is, I think through the first 4 games last year, it was 40.8 points a game, and this year it's 41 points a game, so they're scoring more. I don't know what to tell you at this point. If you are bitching still, just Harrison and I have talked about this offline. The one thing that I would say if I was going to criticize Mike Bobo in the past is that when you had to have that play, when you had to have it, is when he couldn't deliver. It wasn't play 1 through 100. It was just that one that you needed. Okay. But He has not been in that situation yet. So, like, let's wait and see. And this goes back to my rant from a couple of weeks ago with this is the greatest time to ever be a Georgia fan in my entire life, in my 44 years of life. This is the best time to ever be a Georgia fan. Almost everybody watching the show is younger than I am. You have never seen Georgia be this good in your entire life. So why are you going to spend the whole time bitching and complaining? Enjoy it, brother, because guess what? It's not going to last forever. Ask Alabama. You know, they thought that dynasty was never going to end, and it looks like it's coming to an end now. So just enjoy it, man. And I'm just over the media with this false narrative that everybody's complaining. It's not everybody. So that's it. I think we lost some viewers on that. Maybe I got too heated. Who knows?
It don't matter. If they don't want to be here, they don't want to be here. Dan, important poll time. 50% of our viewers think Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift's a stunt. 50% of our viewers say no. So only 2 votes so far, but we're split. We're splitting hairs here.
2 votes.
Yeah. Hey, it's data. Data none the least. Let's get into some Georgia talk. Pretty good weekend. And here's my thing, Dan. If I were to have a rant today, it would be to the folks that like to talk about halftime stats. Why are we talking about a game at halftime? Why are we talking about half of a game instead of talking about the whole game? I get it. You want your team to be perfect. You want your team to play all 4 quarters to the best of their abilities. I understand it. It is very important that a team doesn't just show up in the second half. Like you got to play for good football for all 4 quarters to win, or at least the majority of the quarters. You have to play better football than your opponent for the majority of the quarters to win a football game. I think that's how that works. But I go on my timeline over the weekend right after the win, Dan. Final score was what? 49-21. Why are people still talking about the halftime score being 21-14? Like why are we talking about just the first 2 quarters? I get it. It's where you it's where you perceived to have struggled. It's because the game was close against an opponent. You were a 40-plus game favorite or 40-point favorite, something like that. It's getting ridiculous, Dan, because I see it every single week. And I'm sure we're going to see it this weekend. If Georgia's down at halftime, if Georgia leads at halftime, and it's not by a lot, everyone's going to say, even if they go in and they blow out Auburn, everybody's narrative is going to be this Georgia team isn't that good because they only led Auburn by a touchdown at halftime. We're just going to forget the rest of the game. We're going to forget the third quarter, the fourth quarter, because apparently the game's over after the second quarter, Dan. Like that's what it seems like to me. And Dan, I got a stat for you today. Not my doing. Cole Kubelik, shout out to you because you posted this today and I just saw it. Georgia is outscoring teams 56-0 in the third quarter this season. That is elite in the third quarter.
They actually had that on the game itself. They had that stat. But I have an interjection to make okay?
Go ahead.
Why do we talk about halftime stats? Well, the reason we talk about halftime stats is because it's halftime of the game and you've got 20 minutes to fill. So that's part of the reason. You do want to judge how teams are coming out to start. Statistically speaking, second half stats, especially in the NFL, second half stats are usually teams are more productive in the second half typically in the NFL than they are in the first half. And the reason is because in the first quarter, most of the time, people don't come out with their hair on fire. They're kind of filling each other out. So if you think about it, you really only have a quarter to kind of get going. This isn't a steadfast rule. I wouldn't write this in pen. I would write this in pencil. Just more times than not, you're going to have a better second half. However, in this game, Carson Beck threw for 338 yards and 3 touchdowns. The guy, I don't understand the hate he's getting. But I want to touch on something. This is more important than what you said. You said something about this team's not that great. Okay, well, think about all the other teams in the country right now. What team scares you? Right? Because I can't think of another team that scares me. And here's the thing. 2021, you had probably one of the best defensive teams ever. Okay? 2022, you had a defense that was really good, not as good as 21, but really good. But you had a quarterback who almost won the Heisman Trophy, putting up massive numbers on offense. Okay, so you had 2 historically great teams. Here's the good news: the 2023 team doesn't have to beat either one of those teams. They only have to beat the other teams that are playing college football right now. And in my opinion, they can do that. And it doesn't matter that they're not as good as 21. It doesn't matter that they're not as good as 22. It's not a competition. When you win the national title at the end of the year, they don't say Georgia, first three-peat champion, but this one has an asterisk because they're not as good as the two other teams. Nobody gives a shit. And when the last time somebody repeated, it was like the 1930s. So I don't understand this incessant need to say that this team isn't as good as last year's team. It doesn't matter. As long as they're better than every other team that's playing college football this year, then it doesn't matter. So to your point, why are we worried about halftime stats? Why the hell are we trying to compare it to last year? I'm out on that one, Harrison.
I'm with you, Dan. That is an excellent point. I just put in our private chat a timestamp, so I remember to go clip that. Excellent point. It's the same thing. People are doing the same thing each year when we talk about national champions. It's, this Georgia team wasn't as good as the Alabama national champion 2020. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. We don't judge national championship teams by the national championship teams that came before them, ever, because they never play each other. It is the national championship team last year, their last game they ever played together was against TCU. That was it. Like, that has no referendum on the next Georgia team or the next national champion. There's no need to compare at all because this team is different than last year's team. It's different than the team 2 years ago. It's going to be different than the team next year. Like, there's no reason to compare it. It's like Dan said, it's just national champions are the teams that are better than the rest. Right now, do we have a standout number one team in the country? To me, Dan, I don't think so. I don't think we've seen a team that has been as dominant as Georgia was in 21 or in 22.
Or 22.
Yeah, I don't see it right now. Now, then again, we were talking about, I think this was a talking point last year, that there was no standout number one through 4 weeks because Georgia let up 22 points to Kent State. And then once we got on through the season and once Georgia beat Tennessee, then the talk of Georgia being dominant and being the standout number one team came into the picture. So maybe it's just too early. Maybe we don't have enough data points to even say that there is a standout number one. But I will tell you this, Dan. I will tell you this, and it's something we talked about before the show. Georgia's schedule's heating up. This is the meat of the schedule. The first 4 weeks of the season, there ain't much to judge by. That South Carolina game is the biggest data point that Georgia fans can look at and can use. By all means, use it. You were down at halftime. You were down 14-3. You come out and you whoop butt in the third and fourth quarter. Excuse me. That's a statistical data point. That is a relevant data point. What Georgia did against UAB is going to have no bearing on what they do against Auburn. But I will say this, Dan. When I watched this UAB game, I will say the offense looked like they were putting things together. For the first time, at least this season so far, the offense played a game probably for all 4 quarters where you're like, this can win a national championship. Now, a lot of the criticism regarding Carson Beck, we've talked about this. I think a lot of people are judging him because he's not throwing the deep ball or he hasn't really hit the deep ball when he tries to throw it, whether that's on him overthrowing or whether that's on receivers not catching the football. That's kind of been the biggest, I think, argument against him as to why so-and-so should be starting over him. Well, let me say this. They came out and they threw a 30-plus yard pass first play of the game. Big play right off the bat. Last few games, it's been a run play or maybe a quick game passing game. They came out and they threw it early. They threw a couple deep shots in the first half. They didn't connect on them. But I will say this. When they do connect on them, Dan, when they start hitting in mid-November and that team is in sync, this offense is in sync, there's not going to be a team in college football that is going to be able to stop them. Because right now, Georgia's winning games. They're scoring 49 points without a consistent deep ball. Well, just imagine when they can start hitting those, what this offense can do.
Well, yeah. So I think there's a couple things here at play, and I've been watching. So you said there's no dominant team in college football, and I agree with you, and I think we both agree with that. But if you look at the 2 most talented teams in the country, which I think maybe 3, I guess you would have to say or Ohio State's one of the most talented teams. But I was going to say between Georgia and Michigan, probably the 2 most talented teams that came in ranked number 1 and number 2 to start the season. What do they have in common? The one thing to me that they have in common is they look bored. They look like they're not ready to – like they look bored. I'm not going to really expand on that. It's just they look bored. But The other thing too is Georgia is probably the most injured team I've ever seen in my entire life. And we are missing a ton of key personnel. And I know that sounds like an excuse, but it's a valid excuse. It's like those are real people who were going to play quality minutes, and it's not like they're missing one or two. Next guy up, it's they are missing a lot, and they are playing teams that they are significantly better than. So, what are the coaches are going to what do the coaches want to do? They want to make sure that they get a lot of opportunities for a lot of different people. They're not really focused in on their top 22 and just hammering down. They're letting a lot of guys get reps, and in theory, that should be keeping you healthy, but they just got guys dropping like flies. I mean, you have our best wide receiver, hasn't played a single snap this year. You have the leader of the defense, probably one of the most important pieces you could possibly have, in my opinion, in Javon Bullard on the back end. He hasn't played in the last two games. Now, he did play in the first two games, but he didn't play the last two games. And I think that, that's important to note. There's a lot of different guys. I mean, we're missing a tackle. Now, I say we're missing Amarius Mims, and I don't want to miss that guy because I think he's a phenomenal football player. But there are some people, and I'm not going to call out names or anything like that, but I've listened to a couple different people who feel like ever since he's been out of the lineup for whatever reason, the offensive line has played better. I don't know why that would be, and I don't think that's an indication or what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not condemning Amarius Mims, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying that they think they're looking better, but maybe that just be a product of they're actually getting more and more reps together because they are replacing some parts on the offensive line. I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons, Harrison, why this team hasn't been amazing. But you know what? Chuck Oliver said something today on the radio that resonated with me is that, did they have to win 73-0 to make you feel better? Like, because at the end of the day, and that's where I got the stat from on Twitter today where I was joking, which he said in 2023, Georgia averaged 1 win per Saturday. And then in 2022, Georgia averaged 1 win per Saturday, which is, it's funny, right? But it's true. It's like the name of the game is to go out there, play and win. And as long as you're doing that, does it really matter how you get it done? Because now are we in a different world here where like it only counts if it looks pretty? Because yes, it's less stress in our lives if we just go out there and beat somebody 73-0, but like we're winning, guys, and it's not necessarily close. So what more do you want? I guess, and that's gonna be my question week in and week out is what more do you want?
Yeah, I think in this day and age, style points is really the points that are the only points that people care about. You can score 70 points, and if you don't look good on 2 possessions, then you get no style points. Apparently, is the way things work. But yeah, to your point, Georgia, isn't firing all cylinders at this point in the season. Now, were we expecting them to? No, I think they've won each game like you expected them to. I know they had a slow start against UT Martin, came out and scored, I think it was 30 plus in the second half. And made that game a total blowout, more so than it did in the first half. Same thing with UAB. You have a big second half to make that game look just as dominant as you need it to be. But my big takeaway, Dan, from UAB as they go into Auburn is, I don't like to speculate, and I don't know anything for sure, but Georgia's offense, started to actually do what many expected them to do. Like, Brock Bowers was targeted over 10 times. Like, they hadn't done that to this point in the season. Brock Bowers had 9 yards and had 9 receptions for 121 yards, 2 tutties. That's Brock Bowers' numbers right there. That is what you expect him to do from the jump because that's what he's done in the past. The first few weeks, Dan, they didn't really use him, nor did they really have to use him to their point. They didn't really have to use him against UAB either. But against South Carolina, their biggest test so far, he had 7 receptions for 54 yards. He hasn't been a big part of the game plan. Now, I don't know if that's on purpose. I don't know if that was just the way people were playing him, or if at this point, maybe Brock was dealing with an injury and now he's healthy again, fully healthy again. And they said, okay, we're going to get you ready. We're going to get you ready to go going into conference play because we want, this offense playing on full cylinder, firing on all cylinders. And the offense looked great. Scored 49 points. Like, that is a good day at the office, especially when your best player leads the team in receptions like he's supposed to. So, to me, Dan, I think even with the players Georgia has on the field, we know Kendall Milton hasn't been healthy, like playing at 100%. We know Kendall Milton has been playing below 100% since the start of the season. I know he missed this past week due to injury. They held him out, but just to me, Dan, they started designing shots for Bowers. They started getting Bowers the ball in ways that we didn't really see in those first few games. That's my big takeaway. And heading into Auburn, I don't expect anything to change with that. You're going to get Brock Bowers the ball almost 10 times a game.
I have a big takeaway from the game. Would you like to hear my big takeaway?
Go ahead.
My big takeaway is they need to get Amari Thomas in the transfer portal. I don't know how you can get him, and I know it's tampering. Maybe I'll find his Instagram and tell him to jump over here in the transfer portal ASAP. Amari Thomas is a dude. Freshman out of Birmingham, which we know because they said it 48,000 times during the broadcast. Imagine if they had a quarterback that could throw the ball like on the money, because he had 9 catches for 60 yards and 1 touchdown. Buddy could have had 150 yards and multiple touchdowns if the ball was where it was supposed to be. There were plenty of times he was running through our secondary wide open, and the ball was thrown over him, under him, behind him, or not necessarily anywhere near him. That guy is a dude. I don't. Maybe he just had that one game. I don't know. But excuse me, Mr. Thomas, if you're not doing anything next Saturday, we could use you because you looked freaking amazing. And I think that's kind of fun when these teams come in here and a kid has a chance to really kind of stand out, because I enjoyed watching the guy play. Well, like I say, I was like, would somebody freaking stop that guy from catching the damn ball? That's what I was really saying. But hell of a player. You're right, Harrison, when you talk about, and I'm stop joking now, but I think Georgia really started to kind of get back on track. Like you said, get Bowers back in there. If Bowers has been banged up, he didn't look at this past weekend. Our running game is starting to come together. It doesn't feel like we're dragging our legs covered in cement like we were the first couple of weeks. I think that we're getting, I think Dijon Edwards is really the bell cow that we were hoping that Kendall Milton would be. And Edwards has been really good since he's gotten back. He's gotten some tough yards. He's really difficult to bring down. I know that they're trying to get Andrew Paul did I do it again? No, I did it. Whew. I know that they're trying to get Andrew Paul some carries and some touches. I hope that we get to see what everybody was so happy about last year, because to this point, he really hasn't been that explosive. Dylan Bell continues to look good. Harrison and I were talking offline that we need to find that kid a different number and put him at running back full time, because he's a really good ball player. And if he's a receiver, just think about what he could do coming out of the backfield. But, you asked a question in our note section, is the defense a concern? They're not a concern. They're a really good defense. They're just not nowhere as good as the last 2 defenses, but they're still really good. And they're probably better than 95% of the defenses in the country. There may be a defense this year that's better than us. I don't know who it is. And I haven't looked at the numbers or anything like that, but I'm sure that there's somebody who's better than us defensively, where in the past, in the last 2 years, we said definitively we are the best defense. But again, like, stop trying to compare him to the other one. So is defense a concern? I don't really think it's a concern, because I think this Georgia offense can score if forced to score. I guess the real question you should ask is, do you trust this defense to get off the field if they have to get off the field? And I don't know that we can answer that question. I think we can say we want to, right? But we can't definitively answer that yet, because they haven't been put in that situation where we needed that. Maybe, I guess you could point to the South Carolina game where they didn't give up a point in the second half, and you kind of felt like they had to shut it down, and they did. So maybe that's enough for you. But I'm talking about that 3rd and 6 or that 3rd and 5, where if they convert, they win, we got to get off the field. We haven't seen that situation yet, and we may not ever see it at any point during the season, because Georgia, I think, is still really, 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 really good.
And we really didn't see it last year, Dan, until the playoffs, until Ohio State with that defense. I mean, we're talking about a game where Georgia was down 14 points for much of the second half. I mean, Georgia got off the field. Ohio State went up. Let me look. They went up. They were up 38-24 with 31 seconds left in the third quarter. Georgia gets a field goal to make it 38-7. Georgia forces a punt defensively, first possession for Ohio State in the fourth quarter. 3 and out. 9 yards after they drove 59 yards and 70 yards. Georgia gets a 3 and out. Georgia scores a touchdown. Defense holds them to a field goal. Georgia goes down and scores the football. Scores, which would be the game winner there for Adonai Mitchell. Man, I almost said DeAndre Swift. Shout out to DeAndre Swift, by the way. I know there's some talk about him being maybe one of the best running backs, if not the best running back so far in the NFL. He's playing like it. For all the people that have been doubting him because of injuries the last few years that have hurt him, he's playing like one of the best running backs in the NFL. But yeah, Dan, I would say right now, South Carolina is the closest thing that we've seen from Georgia in the terms of we need to get off the field. Like, if we don't get off the field, we could lose this football game. They did a pretty good job in that second half. Really great job in that second half. Spencer Rattler completed, I think, less than 10 passes in the second half. I want to say it was around 6 on like 20-something attempts. Like, just tail two halves for Spencer Rattler because he came out hot, played real well. Like, he was going to be the reason South Carolina won that football game. And then second half, Georgia comes out, turns it around, plays really great football. Kirby Smart said in the locker room, Dan, and I don't know if we talked about it, halftime, the clip was released of him in the locker room saying that, we're going to get 6 possessions in the second half, and they're going to score maybe once. And we're going to score on 4 or 5. And Georgia did just about everything Kirby Smart said. Georgia scored on, I believe it was 4. I think he said we're going to get 6 possessions, we're going to score on all of them. And Georgia scored on 4 of the 6. And he said South Carolina's going to get one more, but then we're going to shut them out. Georgia shut the door on South Carolina. Georgia scored on 4 of their 6 possessions, while South Carolina didn't score once in the second half. Georgia got to stop when they needed, got stops in the second half and won that football game. So to me, Dan, I don't, like you said, I don't think defense is a concern compared to the elite standard that has been set from the past 2 defenses. There's obviously a regression there. But then again, we talked about the same thing last year, Dan. The same thing. It just, when I think back to Kent State, when I think back to after that game, when I think back to the Charleston Southern game, I think we're having a lot of the similar conversations to what we were having now. I just think that's the way it is right now. So, am I concerned about anything with this Georgia team? Not right now. But at the same time, it's not to repeat what we said going into South Carolina. It is show me time again. Georgia's going on the road to Jordan-Hare. I talked to Dan. There's 2 reasons Georgia can lose to Auburn. Hugh Freeze, magician, and Jordan-Hare. That environment, at its best, rivals any other stadium in the country at its best. So, Dan, with a young offense, with a young quarterback, with a new coordinator, how does Georgia play in that environment? That's what I'm looking for. Do I expect Georgia to walk in there and score 21, 20 plus in the first half? By all means, no. I think it's going to be a silent count type of day. And I think Georgia may get off to a slow start in that game. Now, what better way that Mike Bobo, if you're listening, your old staffer, James Coley, who was inept in other, by all means, not a great offense, comes out there first, I think his first possession of the game against Auburn and Jordan-Hare, throws that deep shot to Dominic Blaylock to immediately just silence the crowd in 19. Let's see that again. Let Dominic Levitt loose. Hell, if you have Ladd McConkey, send Ladd McConkey on a streak or something. Just take a deep shot at the start of the game, get a big play, get some confidence, and silence that crowd. Because you're gonna have to take out that crowd. From the jump. Because if you don't, and you let Auburn stay in the game, you're fighting an uphill battle at that point.
Yeah, and again, like you said, this is the show me time, right? So we talked about that before the South Carolina game, but I want to see them come out and like you said, silence the crowd. Just get out there early, move the ball, but you don't. And that's the other thing too, is you don't have to score 38 points in the first quarter. Okay, you don't have to do that, but establish that they can't stop you. And if you want to do it in 14 plays, do it in 14 plays. If you do it in 2 plays, do it in 2 plays. But you have to come out and establish yourself and really, I just want to see them have a great first drive. I even if it ends in a field goal, that's fine. But I want to see them have a great first drive. I think set the tone early, and then if you can get a turnover early in the football game, that's everything, Harrison. And you know that, and you've watched enough football where sometimes if you can get points and you follow that immediately up with causing a turnover of some kind or a quick 3 and out, and that momentum starts to build. And that Uncle Mo, once Uncle Mo is on your side, buddy, He's tough to shake. So I don't have a whole lot to add because Auburn. I'm sorry. All I could hear is that thing they play on Chuck and Chernoff where the Auburn sucks. that sucks. But I just Auburn's a real team, and just go take care of them. That's all. Just go take care of them. Just go do it. It's a business trip. Go down there. Don't let all the nonsense happen. Right. And I don't know what else, how to say it, Ayers. Just don't even give all that other crap an opportunity to even evolve. Just go ahead and stuff it out in the first quarter.
Cut their throat from the jump is what they're saying. Just cut the throat. Dan, I wanted to pull this up. This is the game log or the play-by-play from last year's game against Auburn. Georgia didn't score in this game until basically the second quarter. It was 0-0 for the first 4 possessions on each side. I think each side, 2. 4. 4 possessions. We went 4 possessions each side without a score against Auburn at home. So if it's a 0-0 game going into the second quarter, let's not panic, guys. Let's not panic, and let's not say, this Georgia team's not great, that they're not as good as last year's because they didn't score in the first quarter. Well, they barely scored in the first quarter last year against Auburn. So, and that's at home. So let's go ahead and tone it down. Let's not have recency bias. Let's not forget last year because Auburn always has the opportunity to upset you. Heck, they did it back in 2017 in the same environment against a team that Georgia team at the time was undefeated. Was on top of the world, it felt like. Walked into Jordan-Hare, walked out with the tail between their legs, and embarrassed. Absolutely embarrassed by a team that probably shouldn't have beaten them that day. So let's not do this again. Let's not come out of here. I don't want to turn on Twitter at halftime, Dan, and say, oh my God, this Georgia team's not great because they scored 14 points in the first half. Let the game play out before you tweet something angry, something that's just a horrible take. It's going to make you look stupid by the time the 000s hit the scoreboard over there. But let's not do that again, guys. We've seen it all too much recently. There was somebody that tweeted, it was a media member, I believe, tweeted that Carson Beck was going to go into the same category as Joe Cox and a couple others. It was sometime in the first half. I don't know what immediate timestamp it was, but they had that being in. They had him in the same breath as Joe Cox, basically saying he wasn't going to be a good quarterback at the University of Georgia. Took his standards. That tweet got deleted very quickly, very, very, very quickly. By the end of the game. So let's not tweet angry. Just hold your tongue and let the game play out because, like Dan said, the goal is to average a win every Saturday. If you can do that, you're going to be in the postseason. You're going to be in the mix. Dan, that's going to wrap it up for episode 102 of the Top Dog Talk podcast.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to this game. Auburn's always fun. It's the Deep South's oldest rivalry. As Dan said, Auburn is Georgia's kissing cousin, whatever the heck that means in Alabama terms. We won't get into that, but going to be a good game. Should be a good weekend. Dan, I've done it the last few weeks, so I'm going to do it again. Just off the cuff predictions. Utah, Oregon State, Friday night, 9 p.m. Who you got?
You said Utah, Oregon State? I got
Utah, Oregon State.
I think Utah's a really, really good football team. Especially if Cam Rising plays, but they've played multiple games this year without Cam Rising, and they've won those 2. So I got Utah. I don't know what the score would be. I just got Utah.
LSU, Mississippi, Ole Miss. Sorry, LSU, Ole Miss.
This is a game that Ole Miss has to win, but I think LSU wins. I think they're starting to click.
Last one, Notre Dame versus Duke.
I think that's going to be one hell of a football game. Duke has really, really, really been impressive. And I'm interested to see if Notre Dame allows Ohio State to beat them for a second straight week. If you don't understand that, then I don't know what to tell you. I think Duke is a hell of a football team, but I think Notre Dame wins this football game. I would say that game's probably going to be like 24-21. I don't see that being a high-scoring game.
Hey, I got to go back and look at the rankings. I got to see how my man Dan's doing. I believe he picked Clemson last week, which may be his first L in these off-the-cuff predictions. But if that's the case, that's pretty dang good that he's only had one wrong. So we'll see. We'll come back. I'll get the updated record on that, get a record going. We'll see what Dan's picks are doing because I have a feeling that might be the only miss that he's had so far in this season. Which, hey, if you got one loss by this point, with some of the games we've had, some of the slates, that's pretty damn good. Dan, I actually got another one for you. Last one, Dan. I know who you're picking. Give me a score prediction for this one. Colorado USC.
So I have USC winning that game 49-38.
Whoo.
I think it's going to be a back and forth. Now, I mean, listen, originally to start this week, I really felt like USC might just absolutely put 60 something on them and just blow them out. But like I started to think about it, USC's defense, because the offense scores so fast and they will score fast against Colorado. I think that they're going to be tired. So I think it's going to be a shootout. I really do. I mean, like I said, 49-38 is kind of like what I'm feeling. And we didn't give a Georgia score either, so we got to do that.
I'll put let me do this USC one, then we'll get to that one. For me, Dan, I'm going to go 56-28. USC is averaging 55 points a game, so they're scoring 50 points a game at this rate, but they also haven't played not many people. As crazy as it is to think, considering Georgia hasn't really played anybody other than South Carolina to this point. But yeah, I'm going to go. I think Colorado puts up points. I think they look a little bit better than they did last week. But I'm going 56-28 USC. Dan, ooh. Georgia at Auburn, 3:30 on CBS. Going to be a good game. Last version of the Deep South Shoulders rivalry on CBS for some time, probably of all time. This is probably the last one that's going to get put on there. Guys, let's celebrate Jim Nantz and Gary Danielson one last time. Give a salute to them and let them enjoy this game. Dan, what do you got?
So I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, was 42-10. I think that's what last year was. This year, I'm going to say we score a little bit less and we go 38. And I think they're going to score a little bit more and they're going to go 13. So I think the scores will be 38-13, Georgia, of course.
I can get on board with that. They cover. They more than cover.
Georgia hasn't covered all year. So maybe I'm stupid. Maybe it's going to be 17-13. Hell, I don't know. Because Georgia has not covered a single spread all year long.
Man, if it's 17-13, by God, we better go on vacation. We better go on vacation, Dan. We may not have a show next week if that's close because I don't want to see what social media is going to be like. Don't put that bad juju on us, Dan. This one's tough, Dan. Part of me wants to go 24-7, like not many points being put up, if you feel me, but Georgia still somehow covers. Then the other part of me wants to go kind of along the same lines as you. I'm going to say Georgia gets into the 30s. I'm saying 35-13. Think we're going to be right along the same lines there. You have Auburn 13. I'm going to ride with you on that one. I think that's a pretty safe prediction right there. But something just tells me, Dan, that Hugh Freeze is the type of guy where if he has a chance to cover at the end of the game, he's going to try. Like Mark Stoops the other year. Mark Stoops had that goal line stand, was like, he had the over. He was like, I am going to cover. Like my life depends on it. I think Hugh Freeze is going to give it everything he got. And like I said, the two things that scare me most about this game is it's Georgia's first road game and Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze can pull the rabbit out of the hat. Would be a heck of a way to introduce himself to Auburn. But I'm taking Georgia 35-13. Dan has it 38-13 in one of the games of the weekend. It is a hot slate. Texas plays Kansas. We got Utah, Oregon State starting us off on Friday. Florida, Kentucky, if you want to watch that. Nebraska versus Michigan in Nebraska. I want to watch the Cornhuskers. Oklahoma, Iowa State, Notre Dame, Duke, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama, Mississippi State, LSU, Ole Miss. A lot of great games to watch this weekend, guys. Enjoy it while you can, because in a few short months, we'll be back here wishing it was the middle or the end of September and talking about, the next season. So with that being said, episode 102 of the Top Dog Talk podcast, I'm Harrison Reno, alongside me, co-host Dan Kiley. We appreciate y'all for being here. Come back next week. Like, subscribe, rate, review, wherever you get us. We'll see you next week.
Go Dogs.